They were last seen just 250 meters from the summit, three tiny dots on the icy face of Gasherbrum I, swallowed moments later by a whiteout. Nisar Sadpara, Gerfried Göschl, and Cedric Hählen were attempting a bold winter record, but the mountain had sprung its trap. How did the phenomenal endurance of a natural-born Pakistani climber clash with a hurricane in the death zone? And why did their rescue depend not on pilots, but on a bank check? This is a story of triumph that became a tragedy. A story not just of an expedition, but of an unsung hero, Nisar Sadpara. It all began in the shadow of the majestic Karakoram, where people are cut from a different cloth. The village of Sadpara isn't just a settlement. It's a forge for Pakistan's high-altitude climbers. And this is where Nisar's story begins. He would come to be known as Nisar Sadpara, named for his birthplace. He was born into a family where survival was a daily reality. 10 people under one roof, farming the land, with his father's modest income barely enough to feed them all. Life forced a tough choice on Nisar, and he closed his school books far too early. Instead of a desk, he was met with hard labor. The young man picked up a staff and headed for the steep slopes. His responsibility now was yaks and goats, and his office was the sheer cliffs, where one wrong move could cost him everything. But it was here, among the rocks and the wind, that his hidden talent began to show. In their free moments, the shepherds would hold contests. They'd pick a distant peak or a lone tree and take off. While the others gasped in the thin air, fighting off exhaustion, Nisar Sadpara demonstrated something incredible. He didn't just run. He seemed to defy the laws of physics. His stamina was abnormal. He always finished first, without even losing his breath. In the evenings, the atmosphere at home would change. His father would return from work, bringing with him the scent of the great mountains. He'd tell stories of high-altitude guides, foreign expeditions, and peaks that pierced the sky. Nisar listened to these stories, holding his breath. He would look at the horizon and realize his ambitions stretched far beyond the cattle pastures. A plan was taking shape inside him, one that would change his destiny forever. Destiny rarely knocks politely. More often, it barges in without an invitation. For Nisar, that moment came in 1996. He was 18 years old. His life took a sharp turn after meeting a man whose name was spoken with special respect in the local community, Ali Raza. He was a seasoned mountaineer, a veteran of the rocks and glaciers, who saw something more in the young shepherd than just a village boy with strong legs. Ali Raza noticed that cold fire in the young man's eyes, the kind you need to survive at altitude. The mentor decided to act immediately, taking Nisar under his wing. He brought the 18-year-old to the organizers of a serious army expedition. The goal was ambitious and harsh, the peak of Siakungri, a giant standing at 7,422 meters. This is where childhood games end, and the zone where the air becomes treacherously thin begins. However, the expedition leaders looked at Nisar and saw a young man with no professional experience, no impressive track record. The military commanders were adamantly against it. Taking a partner like him on a 7,000er was a huge risk for the entire team. In their eyes, it looked like madness. It seemed the doors to big league mountaineering were slamming shut in Nisar's face before they even had a chance to open. But Ali Raza showed a firmness that rivaled the granite of the Karakoram. He put his own reputation on the line. The mentor practically forced the organizers to reconsider, vouching for the kid with his life. Under the pressure of his authority, the leadership backed down and reluctantly added Nisar to the list of participants. The expedition began. The team consisted of 13 men, strong, well-trained soldiers and experienced climbers. Among them, Nisar Sadpara looked like the odd one out, but only until the real climb started. The mountain quickly put everyone in their place. The slopes of Siakungri mercilessly weeded out those who were weak in spirit or body. The group dwindled, step by step, meter by meter. Men turned back to base camp, abandoning their push for the summit. By the time of the final assault, only a handful of the most resilient remained, and when they finally reached the highest point, only 4 were standing on the summit. Among these chosen few, at an altitude where only jetliners fly, stood Nisar. At 18 years old, he had accomplished what takes many a decade of training. He became one of the youngest climbers in Pakistan's history to summit a 7,000-meter peak. This success was more addictive than any drug. Standing there, among the clouds, he finally understood. There was no going back to a normal life in the valley. The mountains had accepted him, and now he belonged to them. An altitude of 8,000 meters is no place for a teenager. It's a zone where every step is paid for with colossal effort, and oxygen is more precious than gold. But in 1999, a young man appeared on the Baltoro Glacier, ready to challenge that axiom. Nisar Sadpara arrived at the foot of Gasherbrum II, the 13th highest peak in the world. He wasn't there as a tourist, but as a high-altitude porter, the workhorse of the expedition, on whom the lives of the entire team depended. He was hired by a South Korean team led by the stern and pragmatic Lee Sang-bae. For the Korean climbers, discipline and experience were the foundation of survival. When they saw Nisar, their eyes held not respect, but outright skepticism. Before them stood a skinny young man, almost a boy, who, in their opinion, should be sitting at a school desk, not storming the shining mountain. A crisis was brewing in base camp. The expedition leadership held an emergency meeting. The verdict was harsh. The kid was too young, too inexperienced. He would be a liability. They seriously discussed sending him home before the ascent even began, just to avoid the risk. For Nisar, this was a moment of truth. His career could end before it even started, crushed by the authoritative opinion of foreign clients. He felt the pressure, but instead of arguing, he chose to act. The first push began, hauling gear to Camp 1. It's a grueling stage, crossing a dangerous icefall where crevasses are ready to swallow anyone who hesitates. Nisar shouldered a heavy pack and set out on the route. And then, something no one expected happened. While the experienced climbers struggled with shortness of breath and the weight of their gear, the 20-year-old practically flew up the slope. He displayed such physical form that all questions simply vanished. Nisar arrived at Camp 1 fresh, fast, and full of energy. When the Koreans saw him work on the slope, their skepticism melted into sheer astonishment. The expedition leadership took a rare step for such a rigid hierarchy. They officially apologized to the young porter for their doubts. The climb continued, and now Nisar was part of the main group. He successfully reached the summit of Gasherbrum II, logging his first 8,000er. What began as a near firing turned into a strong professional friendship. The expedition leader, Lee Sang-bae, was so impressed with the young man's work that this season became just the beginning of their long journey together. In the future, he would hire Nisar for his teams 7 more times, entrusting him with the most difficult tasks. The mountains don't forgive mistakes, but sometimes they strike first, even when you do everything right. The year is 2000. Nisar returns to the Karakoram, this time to the foot of Broad Peak, the 12th highest peak on the planet. He's with a Korean expedition again, but now he carries the responsibility not of a novice, but of a proven veteran. The route seems familiar, the weather tolerable, but the mountains have their own plans for this season. During the ascent to the first high-altitude camp, the silence of the thin air is shattered by a whistle. A rock, dislodged from somewhere above, hurtles down on an unpredictable trajectory and finds its target. It strikes Nisar directly in the head. In any other second, on any other mountain, this would have been the end of the expedition. Most climbers in this situation would turn back immediately. The risk of losing consciousness or developing complications at an altitude where the body is already at its limit is far too great. But Nisar does something different. He hastily bandages the wound, pausing only for a moment to collect himself. There's no panic in his actions, only cold calculation and stubbornness. Instead of descending to the warmth of base camp, he adjusts his gear and keeps climbing up. Step by step, he assaults the 8,047-meter peak. When he stands on the summit of Broad Peak, it's a victory not over the mountain, but over the limits of the human body. This incident becomes a legend among his peers, the Pakistani with a bandaged head who refused to give up. 3 years pass. It's now 2003. Nisar is no longer just surviving in the mountains. He's starting to dictate his own terms. He feels he has the strength for something more than one summit per season. His target is Gasherbrum I, also known as Hidden Peak. This mountain is higher and technically more difficult than its neighbors, at 8,068 meters. Nisar successfully completes the route, adding another 8,000er to his collection. However, descending to base camp isn't the end of the job for him. While others celebrate their success and pack their bags, Nisar looks at the neighboring peak. In the same season, with almost no rest, he accomplishes the incredible. He climbs Gasherbrum II for the second time in his career, 2 8,000ers in a single summer. A double like that requires colossal endurance, but for Nisar, it's becoming the norm. It was during this season, amidst the icy winds and the tented life of base camp, that a meeting took place that would define his future. Nisar met the Austrian climber Gerfried Göschl. Between them lay a cultural chasm and a language barrier, but the mountains speak a universal language of risk and trust. Göschl saw a kindred spirit in the Pakistani guide, a man who, like himself, lived for the vertical. This friendship, forged on the slopes of the Gasherbrums, would become one of the strongest and, ultimately, most fateful bonds in Nisar's life. If the Gasherbrums were a test of his mettle, then K2 was the final exam, one you couldn't retake. The year is 2004. The climbing world holds its breath. This is a special season. The golden anniversary. Exactly 50 years ago, man first set foot on the summit of the Savage Mountain. And now, Pakistan intends to mark the date with a grand celebration. A massive joint expedition with China is organized. Nisar Sadpara gets a call you don't turn down. He's on the summit team. This time, his partner is Nisar Sadpara, another titan of the local mountains. Together, they form a team that moves like a single organism. They understand each other without a word, trusting instincts honed by years of living on the glaciers. Their task is to ascend 8,611 meters via the Abruzzi Spur, a route that forgives no weakness. In the death zone, most climbers become slow-moving shadows. Their brains are starved of oxygen. Every movement requires a titanic effort, and the tank on their back becomes the only thread connecting them to life. But Nisar once again defies all physiological logic. He flatly refuses to use supplemental oxygen. While others are gasping for air, he utters a phrase that baffles doctors. The higher I climb, the better I feel. It's as if his body switches to a different mode, thriving on the thin air where others lose consciousness. On July 27th, a weather window opens. The summit team makes its final push. They navigate the infamous bottleneck under a looming ice serac, ready to collapse at any moment. Step by step, crampons biting into the hard fern, they press on toward their goal. And then, there's no more up, only sky. In that moment, Nisar Sadpara writes his name in history in golden letters. He's just 24 years old. Standing on the summit of the world's second highest mountain, he becomes the youngest Pakistani to ever achieve this feat. But that's a personal record. For his people, this event has a much deeper meaning. Nisar becomes the first native of Baltistan, that rugged land where these giants stand, to gaze out upon the world from the summit of K2. This triumph changes everything. He's no longer just a talented porter or a reliable guide. In the eyes of the international community, he is now elite. The success of the anniversary expedition echoes across the country, but for Nisar, it's merely confirmation that he has chosen the right path. The mountains have accepted him, and on top of the world, he feels right at home. After the triumph on K2, it seems there's nowhere higher to go, but Nisar Sadpara finds a way to surprise even those who have seen it all in the mountains. The summer of 2006 arrives. Nisar is at the absolute peak of his physical machine. He feels a power within him that makes the standard rules of high-altitude mountaineering simply cease to apply. Together with his trusted partner, Nisar Sadpara, he conceives a daring plan that sounds like madness to most. They decide not to choose between peaks, but to take them all. Their goal, the Gasherbrum Double. These are 2 8,000ers standing side by side, but each demands total commitment and absolute focus. On July 16th, the pair begins to execute their plan. They assault Gasherbrum II, the mountain where Nisar's career once began. By this point, he's already summited it twice. The third ascent goes perfectly. They stand at 8,035 meters, log their success, and begin the descent. This is where a normal expedition would end. Climbers would go down to base camp, drink hot tea, accept congratulations, and spend weeks recovering. But Nisar and Hassan tear up that script. They descend only long enough to catch their breath, then immediately turn toward the neighboring giant, Gasherbrum I. They have no time for a full recovery. Their bodies are operating beyond all limits, ignoring the accumulated fatigue and oxygen debt. They use their acclimatization as a springboard. The team launches their assault on the second mountain, while the echoes of their first success are still ringing through the camp. On July 22nd, just 6 days after the first summit, they are standing on the peak of Gasherbrum I. What they've done is hard to comprehend. 2 8,000ers in just 7 days, 1 week. 2 peaks from the list of the world's highest mountains. In the sports world, this is what's known as a golden double. The local press is filled with headlines about the new record. Journalists call the achievement unique, as such speed and endurance are incredibly rare. For Nisar himself, this week becomes the ultimate proof of his phenomenal condition. He realizes his body can handle loads that break other people. He doesn't just survive in the death zone, he lives there, at a rhythm inaccessible to ordinary humans. This 2-peak marathon solidifies his reputation as one of the fastest and most durable high-altitude climbers of his generation, ready for any challenge the Karakoram throws at him. Most people stop after their first major victory, believing you shouldn't press your luck. But for Nisar Sadpara, the mountains aren't a lottery. They're a mathematical problem to be solved to the very end. After the phenomenal Gasherbrum double, he doesn't slow down. The year is 2007. He returns once again to the slopes of Gasherbrum I, this time as part of a joint expedition with Chinese climbers. For him, this ascent is like reviewing his notes. He reaches the summit with confidence and precision, as if checking to see if the mountain still remembers his footsteps. Now, a map of Pakistan lies before him, marked with the country's 5 major peaks, the 5 8,000ers that make up the crown of local mountaineering. 4 of them are already conquered, K2, both Gasherbrums and Broad Peak. Only the 5th element remains, one that stands apart, Nanga Parbat, a mountain located in the Himalayas, far from the Karakoram cluster of giants. It's called the Naked Mountain for its sheer walls that refuse to hold snow, and it has a reputation as one of the harshest peaks on the planet. In 2008, Nisar sets out to close this final chapter. He's once again teamed up with his loyal partner, Nisar Sadpara. By now, they're a tandem that understands each other on an intuitive level. They approach the base of the 8,126-meter giant. Nanga Parbat is famous for its unpredictable weather and colossal vertical gain from base to summit, but Nisar's experience allows him to manage his energy perfectly. The summer season proves favorable. After crossing endless ice fields and rocky buttresses, Nisar Sadpara stands on the summit of Nanga Parbat. In that thin air, he realizes the sheer scale of his achievement. The project is complete. The collection is whole. Nisar becomes only the 3rd Pakistani in history to climb all 5 of his homeland's 8,000ers. Before him, only the legendary Rajab Shah and his partner Hassan had done it. It's now official. Nisar has joined an elite club, with admission granted to only a select few. Upon his return from the mountains, he is greeted with rest in his village and recognition at the official level. In Islamabad, in a formal ceremony, the Alpine Club of Pakistan presents him with a certificate confirming his status. The paper and seal make official what was already carved in stone. A simple boy from the village of Sadpara has become a national hero, one who has conquered all the high-altitude poles of his land. But as the camera flashes in the capital fade, Nisar returns to a reality that no certificate can change. For him, the death zone is a workplace with the highest stakes in the world. Every step he takes above 8,000 meters is a deal with fate, where he trades risk for the security of his loved ones. He understands better than anyone that the flow of expeditions to Pakistan is as unstable as the mountain weather. Today there are tourists, tomorrow there might be none. So every rupee earned in that icy hell is immediately invested in solid ground for his family. Nisar looks at his relatives and decides that the hard physical labor must end with him. In bustling Skardu, far from the silence of the glaciers, he helps his brother open his own shoe store. It's a modest business, but to Nisar, it's more important than any medal. It's a safety net that will keep the family afloat, even if one day he doesn't return from the slopes. His investment in the future goes even further. He takes a portion of his savings and sends it to the other side of the country, to the hot city of Karachi. There, his younger brother Hamid is studying at a university. Nisar pays his bills, effectively buying his brother a ticket to a different life, one with a pen in his hand and a desk to work at, not an ice axe and a rope. But inside this pragmatic provider lives a dreamer who is starting to feel constrained by his home mountains. Nisar has collected all the Pakistani giants, and now his gaze is fixed abroad. He dreams of the roof of the world, Everest. For a Pakistani porter, this is an almost impossible fantasy. An expedition to Nepal costs an astronomical sum. But Nisar has a powerful ally. His friend and climbing partner, the Austrian Gerfried Göschl, sees the Pakistani's potential and makes him a promise. Göschl guarantees that as soon as they finish their current projects, he will help organize the logistics and find sponsors for a trip to the Himalayas. This agreement opens the door for Nisar to the global elite he dreamed of while listening to the stories of foreign climbers. Nisar's ambitions aren't limited to personal glory. He remembers running up the slopes in plastic sandals without any gear or knowledge. He wants to change the game for the next generation. His plan is to open a real mountaineering club in his home village of Sadpara. He wants to be a mentor for the local youth, to pass on his technical skills and a culture of safety. He wants to see them head into the mountains as trained professionals, not just as porters carrying gear. He's building a foundation, not just for his family, but for his entire community, dreaming of turning his village into a training ground for world-class champions. By 2011, Nisar Sadpara is operating on a level that most people would consider superhuman. He finds himself back on the slopes of Gasherbrum II, part of another international expedition. For the average person, climbing to an altitude of 8,000 meters is the achievement of a lifetime, a story to tell your grandkids. For Nisar, it's becoming almost routine. He follows the familiar route once again, pushes through the death zone, and stands on the summit. This time, however, the number in his record book carries special weight. This is his 10th successful ascent of an 8,000er. With this achievement, he sets a new national record, surpassing all his countrymen in the number of giants he's conquered. He is now, officially, the most accomplished high-altitude mountaineer in Pakistan's history. But the mountains are preparing a new challenge for him, one that demands more than just physical endurance. His longtime friend and climbing partner, an Austrian named Gerfried Göschl, reaches out with an offer that changes the entire game. He's inviting Nisar on a winter expedition to Gasherbrum I. This invitation is fundamentally different from anything that came before. Normally, Nisar works as a hired hand, a high-altitude porter whose job is to carry loads and ensure client safety. But this time, Göschl is offering him a spot as an equal partner on the team. This offer triggers an irreversible shift in Nisar's mindset. For years, he climbed to pay the bills and build a future for his family, seeing the glaciers as a dangerous workshop. Now, his priorities are changing. He's agreeing to the risk not for a paycheck, but for the pure sport of it. Nisar wants to co-author history by taking part in the first-ever winter ascent of a new route. He admits to his friends that he's driven by the desire to simply be a part of it, this grand project. The pragmatism of a provider gives way to the ambition of a pioneer. He is stepping out of the shadows of the support staff and becoming a full-fledged player in the major leagues of world mountaineering, ready to storm a frozen summit on equal footing with the European elite. Sometimes intuition is more accurate than any radar, and inside the Sadpara family home, the alarm bells are ringing deafeningly loud. The calendar shows early January, a time when sensible people stay close to the hearth. But Nisar is packing his gear. His father, Ali Sher, watches these preparations with a heavy heart. He's a veteran of these slopes and knows the bitter truth. The Karakoram in winter is not the same place it is in summer. The mountains transform into a white desert where any mistake becomes fatal. Ali Sher breaks his usual silence. He practically begs his son to reconsider, to just skip this one season. The old man speaks of a cold that freezes the breath in your lungs, and of storms that can sweep a man off a ridge like a dry leaf. It's a desperate plea from a father who feels a darkness gathering on the horizon. But for Nisar, a code of honor weighs more than the instinct for self-preservation. He explains that this isn't just a job he can turn down. Gerfried Göschl, the expedition leader, didn't just hire him. He chose him personally. He insisted that Nisar be the backbone of this team. To back out now would be to betray the friend who elevated him from porter to partner. On January 5th, Nisar steps out the door, leaving the safety of Skardu behind. He sets off for the starting point, moving relentlessly toward a fate that's already waiting for him on the ice. When the team finally assembles at base camp, they look like a squad of astronauts who've just landed on a hostile planet. Alongside Nisar and Göschl, there's the Swiss precision of Cedric Hählen, the boundless energy of the Spaniard Alex Techicon, and the experience of the Canadian Louis Rousseau. They look up at the mountain, but their eyes aren't searching for the usual path. And here, there's an unexpected twist. The group turns away from the standard route. Their choice falls on the southwest face. This route is a ghost. It's been abandoned for 25 years, left untouched by human ambition due to its extreme difficulty. To attempt it in summer is audacious. To challenge it in winter is pure madness. The mountain responds to their presence with immediate aggression. The environment they enter is hostile to any form of life. The temperature drops to -40 degrees Celsius, a cold so intense that metal burns the skin on contact. But the frost has a terrifying ally: the wind. Gusts tear through the valley at over 100 kilometers per hour, shaking the small tents and threatening to rip the camp right off the glacier. Every minute spent outside becomes a battle for thermal balance. The stage is set, a route forgotten by history, weather that wants to destroy them, and a timer counting down to an opportunity that might never come. In the death zone, patience is a weapon that can turn against you at any moment. By the end of February, the team finds itself in a situation more exhausting than any climb. The high-altitude camps are fully stocked, the route is fixed with ropes, and the gear is ready. But the mountain is holding its ground. The climbers sit in their tents, listening to the roar of the wind, waiting for a mercy that may never come from the heavens. Each week of waiting erodes their acclimatization and burns through their morale. They're like sprinters held in the starting blocks for far too long. On March 7th, the radio finally crackles with long-awaited news. The meteorologists see a break in the weather. The forecast promises a short lull, a narrow weather window they can try to slip through to reach the summit. It's not a guarantee of success, it's just a chance. But the team grabs it without a second thought. They know there might not be another opportunity this season. The lead trio begins the final push, heading up the icy walls. However, the mountain starts to weed out the contenders even before the final battle. At Camp 2, a dramatic split occurs. The Spaniard, Alex Techicon, one of the strongest members of the group, is forced to stop. He looks at his hands and realizes the game is over for him. The frost has already left its mark. His fingers are touched by frostbite, and the accumulated fatigue turns every movement into torture. Alex makes the gut-wrenching, but only correct, decision: to stay behind. He watches his comrades disappear above, into the white unknown, and then there were three: Nisar Sadpara, Gerfried Göschl, and Cedric Hählen. They become the tip of a spear, aimed at the sky. But as soon as they gain more altitude, nature seems to decide to punish them for their audacity. On March 8th, instead of the promised calm, the conditions begin to deteriorate rapidly. The temperature plummets to catastrophic levels, -45 degrees. In this cold, any exposed skin instantly loses all feeling. The wind, which was supposed to die down, instead intensifies. Its gusts reach 120 kilometers per hour. This is no longer just a current of air. It's a physical wall trying to throw them off the slope. Visibility drops, and landmarks vanish into a swirling vortex of snow. Logic dictates they should turn back while they still have the strength. But the climbers see the situation differently. They're trapped in the tunnel vision of a singular goal. The trio continues upward, believing they can still slip through that window before the storm slams the trap shut for good. They're betting on speed, trying to outrun the hurricane. History sometimes brings people together at the same point in space, only to send them down different paths of fate. On March 9th, a scene worthy of a Greek tragedy plays out on Gasherbrum I, where triumph and catastrophe exist in the same second. The morning begins with a victory. A Polish expedition, having chosen the classic route from the northwest, achieves the impossible. They reach the summit, writing their names in history as the first people to conquer this peak in winter. They stand where the air is as thin as a razor's edge, celebrating their success. At the same time, on the other side of the mountain, a satellite phone comes to life. The time is 10:30 in the morning. Gerfried Göschl makes contact with the outside world. His voice is a mix of tension and excitement. He reports their coordinates. The team is at an altitude of roughly 7,600 meters. Only 450 vertical meters remain to the summit. For a trained athlete at sea level, this is a light jog. But here, in the death zone, it's hours of grueling battle against gravity. They keep moving, ignoring their exhaustion. A few hours later, the perspective shifts. Around 2 in the afternoon, the Polish climbers are already starting their descent. They hurry to get down, sensing the mountain's mood changing. Looking back at the south face, they freeze. In the distance, among the endless snow and rock, they can make out 3 tiny silhouettes. It's not a hallucination from hypoxia. It's Nisar, Gerfried, and Cedric. They are still going up. This sighting is confirmed by Alex Chaikon. Down in the lower camp, he's glued to his binoculars, trying to spot his friends through the breaks in the clouds. He sees those 3 dots. By his calculations, they are critically close to their goal. Just 250 meters separate them from the summit. On a Himalayan scale, that's an arm's length away. It seems that with one more push, they will stand beside the Polish flag. And here, the most chilling contrast of the day emerges. The 2 groups are within sight of each other, but they are moving in opposite directions. The Poles, having already claimed their glory, are fleeing the approaching threat, escaping the cold. Nisar and his team, on the other hand, are climbing straight into the jaws of the storm. One group is descending towards life, while the other is ascending into the unknown. The witnesses watch these black dots on the white slope, unaware that they are seeing them for the very last time. Those last 250 meters, they're the dividing line between coming home and vanishing forever. It's as if the mountain drops a heavy curtain, ending the show on its highest note. Just a minute ago, observers could see 3 tiny dots crawling toward their goal. But now, the Karakoram decides the show is over. Visibility vanishes in an instant, like someone flipped a switch in a windowless room. A whiteout swallows the summit of Gasherbrum I, erasing the line between sky and earth. In that moment, nature unleashes its most terrifying weapon, one that experience, willpower, and modern gear are powerless against. A monstrous force slams into the ridge. This isn't just a blizzard, it's a hurricane-force storm, the kind that usually rages only in the stratosphere. The wind accelerates to 150 kilometers per hour. At an altitude of 8,000 meters, a current of air like that becomes a physical wall. It knocks you off your feet, makes it impossible to breathe, and rips ice axes from your hands. In these conditions, a person becomes a dry leaf caught in a jet engine. There is nowhere to hide. The route the team is on follows a ridge as sharp as a knife's edge. There are no rocky alcoves or caves here, just open space, exposed to every wind on the planet. Experts analyzing the disaster later would come to the only logical conclusion. The climbers were, quite simply, blown off the mountain. It happens fast, maybe in a fraction of a second. The physics are merciless. When a gust of wind that strong hits a person exhausted from a multi-hour summit push, staying on your feet is impossible. The only question is which way fate throws them. On one side lies China. On the other, the bottomless chasms of Pakistan's southern slopes. Either way, it's a fall into the void, a flight of several kilometers that leaves no chance of survival. The most agonizing part of this story is hidden in the fog of the unknown. No one in the world knows exactly where that fatal blow struck. Did they manage to cover those last 250 meters? Did Nisar's foot touch the summit, making him a winter first ascensionist? Or did the elements stop them just one step from triumph? That secret will remain on the mountain forever. Down below, in base camp and the tents of the intermediate camps, a silence falls that is more terrifying than any scream. People press radios to their ears, hoping to hear Gerfried's or Nisar's voice through the static. They wait for a signal of victory, or even just a call for help, but the airwaves are silent. The radio signals go out into the void and don't return. With every passing minute, hope melts away, replaced by a cold realization. The team is gone. They have dissolved into the white noise of the storm, leaving behind no coordinates, no final words, not a single trace. The people below understand. A catastrophe has occurred. In these situations, every second is golden, and the only chance of rescue is by air. The expedition managers immediately contact Askari Aviation, the only organization in Pakistan with helicopters capable of operating at high altitudes. It would seem that the rescue mechanism should launch automatically at a distress signal, but instead of the sound of rotors, a heavy, oppressive silence hangs over the glacier. A silence caused not by the weather, but by red tape. A wall stands in the rescuer's way, a wall you can't break with an ice axe. A shocking detail comes to light. The tour operator handling the logistics failed to pay the mandatory insurance deposit. The price tag? $10,000. That's how much it costs to start the engines of a rescue helicopter. For the military pilots who follow strict protocols, no money in the account means no takeoff. This isn't cruelty on the part of the pilots. It's a system where a financial guarantee is valued more than human life. No one wants to cover the costs of an expensive flight without confirmation of payment. And so begins the most excruciating phase of this drama. While Nisar and his companions might still be fighting for their lives somewhere at 7,000 meters, endless phone calls are being made in offices in Islamabad and Skardu. March 10th is lost to arguments. March 11th vanishes in a wait for faxes and confirmations. March 12th, more silence. Critical days are lost, that golden window when victims can still be found alive. The mountaineering community watches with helpless fury. The Great Peak has become a trap, and the keys are locked in a bank vault. The situation only breaks its deadlock when the conflict goes international. Since an Austrian citizen, Gerfried Göschl, is on the team, his country's embassy intervenes. The diplomats act decisively and swiftly. They provide the necessary financial guarantees on their own authority, essentially forcing the bureaucratic machine to start. Only after an official letter from the ambassador do the military give the green light for takeoff. The helicopters are prepared for flight on March 13th, a full 4 days after the team disappeared. This incident becomes a major scandal, one that rips the mask off the industry. If you don't have the right insurance or a deposit, help might simply not come, even if the sky is clear and the helicopter is fully fueled. The silence over the Baltoro Glacier is finally broken by the roar of rotors, but the sound brings not relief, but a heavy sense of finality. Everyone on board knows that the chances of finding anyone alive after a week in the death zone are close to absolute zero. This is a flight for answers, an attempt to at least return the bodies of their loved ones to their families. In the helicopter cockpit sit men for whom this operation is a personal tragedy. One of them is Wolfgang Göschl, the brother of the missing Gerfried, who flew in from Austria to find his sibling. Next to him, Nisar Sadpara stares out the window. For him, this flight is a special kind of torture. He isn't just looking for a fellow climber, he's looking for his shadow. Nisar was his close friend and partner, the man with whom he shared the triumphs of the Golden Week and cold nights on the high walls. Now, Hassan hangs in the air, powerless to help the friend with whom he'd been through hell and high water. On this day, nature seems to be mocking them, offering perfect conditions for a search. The sky is crystal clear, visibility is absolute. The pilots perform miracles of aviation, pushing their machines to the limit. They ascend to an altitude of 7,400 meters, flying dangerously close to the walls of the hidden peak. The helicopters sweep the new route on the southwest face, then move to the classic descent path. Observers scan every meter of the snowfield. They're looking for any fragment of color that breaks the monotonous white. A bright jacket, a tent, a backpack, or a track in the snow. But the mountain maintains its icy silence. Below, there is a terrifying emptiness. The storm that raged on March 9th had done a perfect cleanup job. The wind had erased every trace of human presence, polishing the slopes to a mirror shine. There are no bodies, no scraps of gear, no marks from ice axes. It gives the eerie impression that the three climbers simply vanished into thin air, disappeared without leaving a single piece of evidence that they were ever there. On March 15th, the fuel of hope finally runs out. The pilots return to base empty-handed. Experts analyze photos and reports, but the result is the same: nothing. The leadership of the rescue operation makes a difficult but inevitable decision. The search is officially called off. The authorities admit defeat in the face of the storm's scale. The families are told the bitter news. Nisar Sadpara, Gerfried Göschl, and Cedric Hählen are no longer listed as missing. They are now officially declared deceased. The mountain has taken them, leaving the living with only memories and endless unanswered questions. Fame is a guest that too often arrives only after the host has already left. In the days after the search is called off, the Pakistani press is filled with headlines, but they are colored with mourning. Journalists who had ignored the humble man from Sadpara for years now compete to find the right words. On the front pages, a bitter description appears: the unsung hero. Articles run with titles like "Lost before he was famous." Society suddenly realizes the magnitude of the figure it has lost. People read about his records, about his 10 8,000ers and his unique endurance, and they ask themselves, why didn't we know his name while he was alive? Nisar becomes a symbol of a talent that remained in the shadows until the very end. But while the country discusses the loss of a national treasure, a private drama unfolds in the small village of Sadpara, hidden from the television cameras. Nisar's father, an old man named Ali Sher, doesn't learn of his son's fate from official reports or a phone call. The news arrives with his own neighbors. He sees a crowd of fellow villagers approaching his home. No one explains anything. The old guy doesn't need them to. In Sadpara, these things are understood without words. The mountain has claimed its own. The government announces that Nisar Sadpara will be posthumously awarded the Pride of Performance Medal, one of the country's highest civilian honors. The medal he dreamed of earning with his climbs is now given to his family as a memento of his achievement. However, when it comes to providing real support for his widow and children, the situation becomes more complicated. The name Nisar Sadpara is forever written into the annals of world mountaineering. He is remembered not as a victim of ambition, but as a paragon of professionalism. He becomes a quiet star, a man who did the impossible without fanfare or bravado. His story becomes a legend, one told to young porters around campfires beneath the slopes of the Karakoram. A legend of the man who ran faster than anyone, climbed higher than anyone, and remained there, where the sky touches the earth, the eternal guardian of his dream.